After having paused a little, he added that in respect of the knowledge attained of the question of the cosmic substance Oki-Danoch, his heir had already, as he expressed himself, smelled out its very essence. He said further that owing to the results of the scientific attainments of his heir, all the data for every conviction that had been previously crystallized in his essence, thanks to persevering labors during long years, had by that time not only been totally decrystallized, but that he had even entirely destroyed all his inventions relating to the investigations of this omnipresent cosmic substance, among which was also his famous non-radiating lamp. And sighing deeply, he ended by saying, "I am now in full agreement with the opinion of the result of my all, that it was the greatest misfortune for me to have been occupied so long with this, in the objective sense, absolutely unredeemable sin." Talking further on various incidental topics, we began, in accordance with the flowing of associations of being mentation, to talk also of the three-brained beings breeding on the planet Earth. You remember, I have already told you that my friend Gornahur Harhach was always kept informed of my observations on their strange psyche, which I sent to him as well as to your uncle Tuwalan, even with duplicates of certain of my notes. So, as we were talking of these three-brained beings who have taken your fancy, Gornahur Harhach happened, by the way, to ask me, "Tell me, please, my friend, is it possible that the general duration of the existence of these unfortunates still continues to diminish?" When I began to explain to him the state of affairs there at the present time on this question, and the new data I had elicited concerning the abnormality there, just at that moment, the result of Gornahur Harhach, Gornahur Rachor himself, entered the room where we were. Though the newcomer had exactly the same exterior as his producer, he had the appearance of being very virile and full of fiery youth. When he had taken his place on his perch, as is proper to the three-brained beings of that planet, he began, as is usual to them, to welcome me in an angelically musical voice, with kind and self-satisfying wishes of being feeling. And in conclusion he said with a certain pathos, "Although you are only my Kesjanian father, yet in view of the fact that during my her you assuredly filled with the feeling of full and thorough cognizance the divine obligations taken upon yourself in respect of me, there have been crystallized in my common presence in respect of you data equivalent to those which should be in the common presence of each three-brained being in respect of his own producer. And it is, without doubt, just because of this, that I very often remember you, and each time in my thoughts I wish for you such ensuing circumstances at all times as can lead in general to, in the objective sense, a good and happy future." You probably, my boy, did not understand what I meant when I told you that Gornahur Rachor took his place on his perch. The point is that the three-brained beings of this planet, according to their outer coating, gradually acquire the habit of resting only in that posture, when, after having stooped in a special way, they let the whole weight of their planetary body rest on their lower extremities, and for these means of resting it gradually became necessary for them to be at a certain height. Hence it is that the three-brained beings there have established the practice of fixing at a certain height, in the rooms where they exist, special sticks for resting, which they call perches. I may as well say also that these perches of theirs are usually embellished with various knickknacks or carved with all kinds of figures, just as is done by your favorites also, when they manifest the same weakness in regard to what they call their furniture. And so, after having taken his place on his perch and expressed his welcome, my dear Kesjanian result outside of me, or my godson, Gurnahur Rakhorch, began to take part in my conversation with Gurnahur Harharch. And so, my boy, when during our conversation on various topics, I, by the way, became interested to learn from my godson what was the reason which led to the crystallizing in his presence of the data for engendering of the impulse to interest himself seriously in the spheres of the elucidating of the details of the omnipresent cosmic substance, Okidanoch, thanks to which he also, like his producer, had become worthy to make certain great cosmic discoveries. Then, after young Rakhorch's reply with explanatory details to this question of mine, the fact became clear to me that the abnormal existence of your favorites already began to act harmfully on the normal existence and on the conscious self-perfecting of beings breeding on the planet Mars. And at the same time, thanks to this detailed reply of his, which was based on scientific foundations, I drew also data for the elucidating of that question, for the solution of which my old Martian friend, the great Tuf Nef Tef, had applied to me with his request. I will try, my boy, to reproduce to you in our speech all the thoughts of this reply of his, also as exactly as possible. After having thought a little at the question which I had put to him, Gurnahur Rakhorch replied with deep seriousness, "At the beginning of my existence, namely at the age when I was still preparing to be a responsible being, I, as is proper to all three-brain beings of this age, devoted the greater part of my time to practicing for the potency to deliberate actively and long. And of itself it so happened that during the interval of time for necessary rest, I used to be occupied with the various experimental apparatuses of my producer. And it was just then at that period of my existence that I began to notice more than once that on certain days the forces and degree of my active mentation grew particularly worse. What I thus constated aroused in me a subjective interest, which served as the source for the engendering in my presence of the requisite impulse for the thorough cognizance of the cause of this fact. And from then on I began to pay attention both to myself as well as to what proceeded around me, and to seek out the causes for it. And after one Gurdjieff, I became convinced beyond doubt that this undesirable state proceeded with me each time on the day when our large life chakhan was in action. It was just this fact which I then first constated, which was the cause that I have since then become seriously interested in this omnipresent cosmic substance, and deeply absorbed in the study of its details. As a result, from the very beginning of my subsequent experimental elucidations, I came to possess an immeasurable number of every kind of proof for the elucidation, both for myself and for others, of the fact that the